Hi all, this is an overview of the game C.S.A., the America's Civil War, 1861 to 65, by R. Ben Madison and Wes Erni. Ben Madison did a Byzantium Reborn based on Brian Train's system for Rebus Spania, and Wes Erni helps him with the combat system of this. This has a similar same sort of basic combat system too, so it has that innovation in it. You're looking at the map upside down because I just finished a game I played from the Union perspective. Prior to that I played a game which was more sort of from, as a solo player, more from the Confederate perspective. We had quite a resounding Confederate victory the first game. This one, the last turn, the last game, the last bit, the a Union managed to get their victory in essentially by taking Montgomery there and Corinth there, whilst holding McClellan, who's still in the Army of Potomac, there next to Richmond here. Now I'll just take you on a quick tour of the components of the game. So that is the map, and these are the pieces. So that's the Army of Northern Virginia. They're nice, thick mini counters. It's a mini map. There's my hand for scale. And you can see it's quite a simple map. You notice these extra thick lines here. I actually drew those in because there's thin black lines the same sort of thickness as these red ones. They delineate unpassable hex sides. Exceedingly important for movement, and you can see when you've got counters on the map it would have been hard to see them, so I thickened them out because this being a strategic coverage of the war, really it's not operational, but it's about management of resources and where your main efforts are, and you are very channeled in this game. For example, let me show you these two hexes here. You can only enter them as the Confederacy. That's why they have those red dotted. So you have some here, like this one's only enterable by the Union, the Confederacy. So you see, if the Confederates get up here, they cannot pass into Maryland unless they do it through Strasbourg, etc., through there. And you can see again, you can't, as a Union, you can't just flow, so that you have to go round Richmond. You can't go straight into Richmond, so you have to sort of flow around it. So, you have to think very carefully about, as the invader, your routes of attack, and then it also helps the C.S.A. very much. You know, they choose where to block because I had the C.S.A. kind of here and here. They knew the Union could not go there, so the Union basically had to separate like this, and it gave the C.S.A. some ability for movement. You got landings here, so there was essentially an invasion here. Had landings all the way around here. Then over here you have naval warfare. Now the C.S.A. get, over the course of the game, a lot of boats, and the Union gets some, not as many as the C.S.A., try and knock them off. That the Union took some out, but otherwise through this the C.S.A. can increase the Union inflation index. So you win the game if your enemy reaches the inflation of here, and we have the Union up to here on both my games, even here on the first game. This tracks inflation. That's the C.S.A. inflation at the end of this game. It also tracks how many reserves you have, and then also these are the general brigade markers, so it tells you how many brigades each of your generals have. You also have each general 20 maximum. That's why it changes. And you also have some markers here for the C.S.A. To track if French or British intervene. In my first game, the British intervened early, which meant that the Union could do none of this invasion. It's considered that the British then control the waters, and they were just severely restricted. The C.S.A. kind of had good fun pushing them back, and that the Union just never got very far. The game normally ends on fall 1864 with re-election of Lincoln. If Lincoln doesn't get re-elected, it's considered McClellan does, and the Confederates are so strong at that point it's considered they win. There is an option you can go through into 1965 and continue playing. I finished at the normal game end, as I said, with just clinching a victory. You have army markers, so you saw one of those, and there's the Army of the Potomac. So the Confederates get 2, the Union 3. They got one here and they had one here. When they're flipped, it means that they've activated. That was all the activations I need in the last turn to win the game. And I put the dots just to denote which side they belong to. So each turn you get 4 turns, so it's a season for each turn, 3 in the first year, and then you get these events chits. So you put the events chits in a cup, draw them out, and then you've got the rulebook here, which is a really nice ring binder. It's a very nice rulebook, that well written, really well edited and proofread, as Fire Dragon do, and just maybe 1 or 2 questions that I had, or some things, no biggies. And then you get this. So this is the chit. So each year the chit has a different listing for it, except for 65. There's no chits for 65, so you'd play that chit list. Essentially, when you draw 2 chits a turn. So you've got a sequence of play card. You start with the logistics phase, where essentially you're taking generals from available boxes, maybe veteran units, cavalry units, and placing them on the map. Then you assign brigades to those generals, maybe more brigades to generals on the map. Then there's some strategic redeployment possibilities, less so for the Confederates, where you can take generals, brigades, and then generals without brigades off the map. They come up here and can come back later. We also have markers here. These are markers for the election markers for each side. And then there's just one here for an optional rule of artillery bonuses for armies. So you have the logistics phase, Confederate, then USA, then the first random events phase. So you do that chit. There's some other things that can happen with Kentucky, which starts out neutral, Missouri, which starts out neutral. Then you go to the naval phase, so you work out that what's going on there. Then you go to what they call the pulse phase. So then you take it in turns, C.S.A. or USA, depending on the mark on the turn. You either move a veteran unit or a cavalry unit, or one of your units within friendly lines, or you can activate a general on a die roll. So each general has a rating. For example, Burnside there, his initiative rating is that 2. So he's got 2 in attack, 4 in defence, and 2 initiative. So on the D6, on a 1 or 2, he's going to activate. So you can see he's a bit slow. That goes to McPherson there. What have we got? We've got, for example, Albert Sidney Johnson's a 4. And then I can't see Grant at the moment, but he's a 5, and Sherman's a 5, and Lee's a 5 for initiative. So in the pulses, one side activates a unit or a general, they move, and then it goes to the other side, so you're alternating activations like that. Movement's very simple, it's nice. If you're adjacent to an enemy, you can move 2 hexes. If you're not, you can move 3. And you can get extra things whereby you can move by rail movement. So the chits random events list a lot of things. Some of these you get a little what they call, you can put a coin in one of these boxes, and it's a special event. So you save them up and play them as and when you want. They're basically for movement, adjusting rolls for initiative for yours and the enemy, and also like various combat. Different types of combat effects that you can bring in there. So the movement's nice in that it's very simple. Everyone moves 3 or 2 if you're adjacent, which basically means if you're not adjacent, you're at most at least 1 hex away, so you sort of can move up just a bit quicker, but you can not whiz past someone. You know, you consider, say, if I'm here and I'm adjacent, I can move 1, 2. If I was not adjacent, I can move 1, 2, 3. So I could move quite fast like that. But you're not whizzing circles around anyone. So back to the chits, because this, so that's the pulse phase. You do all that, then you get reinforcements. Reinforcements depend on your inflation. So you each start at $1 and the inflation rises. So at the end of the game, the inflation was 30 to the dollar, as it were, for the C.S.A., and that's on box number 42, and their reinforcements would be 4 brigades. They start the game with, I think, 13 there. The Union, again, they're on 28 inflation, so they get 4 brigades too. Often the Union's getting more, but not always. Sometimes the Confederate are getting more reinforcements than the Unions in a turn. You can also adjust that with various specials like drafts and paroles. Then you go to the second random events phase, so that's another chit, and then you start the turn again. So every turn has 2 chits drawn, and every year all the chits will drawn. So if you play the game to the end, all of the random events, I shouldn't say random events, I should say chit draws, all of the chit draws happen. It's just that the order they happen within any given year will depend on how you draw them. And what happens? Well, basically you get lots of things. You'll get leaders coming out, leaders being disciplined, going off, or perhaps dying, or possibility of dying. For example, they might get wounded and just come back later. They might be involved in, it's basically all this is historical. So it's like, you know, Van Dorn has a duel or something. I can't remember the exact things, and so he's out for a while. Then you get different extra reinforcements for certain things. So C.S.A. gets some for this, the USA gets some for that. Then boats coming on. British and French entries rolled. If it gets higher than, if they get 20 points higher than the C.S.A. inflation level, then they will come on, and also they might come on particular rolls in chits. So you get Spy at the Stack, Lincoln Contends of Science. Again, apparently this is all, historical stuff that happened interpreted into game terms. So you get these raids, so raids happening in Ohio, so some brigades will be lost, and one in each of these places. Robert Lee suffers from a heart condition on a 7. He goes out of the game. Now all the biggies, they have one of these events. So Lee has that, Stonewall Jackson has that, Sherman and Grant, they all have one of those where you have to roll 2d6 on a 7, they're gone. Okay, so that paroles might happen, which is whereby extra reinforcements for everyone as you exchange prisoners, but here Lincoln cuts it off, so they would stop if they were still going. Then these ones are those special events which you save up, and then you have adjustments for inflation. So the first game I played took 10, maybe 11 hours. This one was a lot quicker, and I had started playing it some years ago and didn't really get into it, but this time I played these games back to back. The second one must have taken me 4.5 hours, I would say. So as a solo play, that's quite quick. And the first game I was a bit so-so, because these events they took me up a lot of time, but I whizzed through them a lot quicker this time, because the first time you're reading all entries and sort of going, oh, that's interesting. The second time I was more just flipping to what's the effect on the board. Got all the chits. I think I've shown you everything. The combat system is the same one for Byzantium Reborn, which is an interesting one where you can you choose how many dice you're going to roll, but if you roll over, your total is over your combat factors, then you score nothing. So you need a pen and paper. These are all the combats every two things, the combats I had in this game just played. So you can see that's a lot of combats. Sometimes they're very equal. You can spend these to spy enemy stacks, things like that, to decide whether you go into combat or not. Sometimes they're very lopsided. Yes, it's great. And there's an interesting procedure whereby I was tempted as the Union to do attritional attacks. So I knew I wouldn't win the attack, but I was hoping to bring down the C.S.A. brigades in a hex so that I would have a better attack on the next time. But that's not such a bright idea, because if you win a combat, even as the defender, what you get to do is you bring on what I call these veterans. Okay, it's just an example. I was trying to get it in the light and in focus. So that's the first Tennessee Volunteers, and you can see they add 2 and 2 to attack or defense, but they're worth 4. Now that's not initiative in this case, but that's what's called fortitude. Normally a brigade is worth 1 point each, and it has 3 fortitudes. So, say for example, we had this battle here. That was the attacker was at 31 versus the defender at 23. And then the attacker rolled 23 points and the defender 20. So you can see the defender was quite close. If he'd rolled 3 more points, like sort of, pushed his luck, adding an extra die, he would have gone over 23 and have scored nothing. But as it was, the attacker gave him 23 hits and he gave 20 back. So he did lose, which means he has to retreat, but they dealt each other both nasty blow. And so normal brigade, you takes 3 of these hits, so that would be 7 brigades lost and 6 brigades lost. So that would go down in your general's track there. But if you have these volunteers, their fortitude rating is 4, so that can soak up 4 of those points lost instead of 3. And you can see I had a huge army here with lots of generals for one thing, veterans, and also cavalry units, which can be a bit unreliable. They can run away when you least want them to. And then that can also be mitigated by spending some of your coins from here. So that's the game in a nutshell. I did download some errata, and I just made some notes myself on it, not errata, but just to remind me how the game plays. And you have to be careful. I did do some things wrong in the first game, so it might not have been such a resounding Confederate victory as it was if I'd played it correctly, because it is a little bit different, this system, than normal. So, but after I played it, and then I sort of checked some rules and realised I've been playing it wrong, I wanted to play again straight away, to play it as it should be played and give it another go, which I think is a good endorsement for this game. It's a small map, but as you can see, you do need a fair bit of space, because you need to. I mean, you could laminate these, which I might do, and then you don't have to lay chits on them, but you can rub on, rub off. But you do need to lay these out, these, and all these, unless you choose to laminate all of those. So it's not a huge space that it takes up, but it does take up more than just the size of the map. One thing it doesn't have boxes for who's in the various armies. So normally these would just be a huge stack on the map. I took them off to the side. So yeah, you get a lot in this game, and a lot of it does come from here. So the events, leaders coming in and out, certain events happening, raids happening, etc., etc. Oh yes, you've even got the far west there, which is mainly kept to small units. You can't have generals rampaging through there with tons of brigades. And in fact, the Confederates locked that up in this version of the war that I just played. So that's an overview of the game. Lastly, is the terrain effects chart. It doesn't have any colours in it, but you don't need colours because there's not that many colours. These blackened hexes are impassable. So you only have 2 types of hex. The other notifications on there are for what's in the hex, or if it's like one of those passable only for one side hexes. So The only sort of reservations I have about the game is it's a very interesting. It's very alternative history in that you don't have the trammeling which other games will give you. For example, perhaps card driven and so forth games on this. So it can go wildly away from the rails of a I'm not going to say off the rails because I don't want it to sound crazy, but away from the rails of a normal strategic treatment of the American Civil War, which I think is good. But then there's a strange disjunct created in that you also have all this historical stuff coming in. So this isn't all everything that necessarily happened historically. Some of it is, but some of it isn't. So, for example, you can take the war your own course, but let me see. Let's find an actual example. I'm trying to find when a leader is disciplined. So here, Beauregard will be cashiered. So he will come on a 1 on D6. He doesn't come back, but he will be brought off for an unauthorized vacation at an Alabama spa. Or, for example, Joseph Johnston's wounded in battle. Now, Joseph Johnson might not have been anywhere near a battle in your game, but that historical event is still going to happen. So there's jam-packed full of historical flavour, but at the same time you're not trammelled by historical situations, which creates a bit of a strange disjunct. But it's not a biggie at all, it's because you want these to be the outside influences, the things happening outside you as a higher commander's control going on. Otherwise it's just that game of the management, which is fun, and in a way I'd like to see a version of this game that sort of soaks all these down into smaller chunks, not so many of them, and because this is a nice game in itself, that brigades and management of the war type effect. This brings a whole new thing to it, sometimes maybe a bit too much, and it's particularly, for instance, in this, you see this is a minus a d6 roll on the C.S.A. inflation. On the same sheet you get a plus d6 roll on the C.S.A. inflation, so in effect that's asking you to roll the dice twice, one for plus, one for minus, when the net effect could be nothing. So you wouldn't get this interesting historical factoid, and nor this one, and you wouldn't get the story which these bring in. But on the other hand, is it necessary for me to go through all that? At the end of a year, my inflation is going to be this or that sort of thing, or at the end of a season. Again, it happens again there. It's not. There's things like that which are not. It's not infrequent that you get something here and then it's contradicted by something there. It might be two different rolls, so you might end up with a different effect from a net of 0, but either way it's kind of like it gives you more to do. Anyway, that's good and bad about it, but overall I would say this is a worthwhile addition to the genre of strategic American Civil War games, and do mutilate your map to make the play a lot easier, like I did. Honestly, I think I made it in a way more attractive as well, because it's just more it sort of pinged it out a bit more by giving a bit more of that delineation to it. And yeah, so it's interesting because you've got these, you've got the events, but it's also exciting. The management is very simply and easily done, and then the way that you have to decide your avenues of advance. Maybe I should sort of pull these back. This is very interesting. I should mention before we go. Yeah, sorry. Yes, these are not huge, like flooded rivers travelling through America, but in fact they're nicely delineated, so it is easy to see. But essentially it's a river runs through that hex, and it's just to show you that that's a river hex, which basically means the USA get double attack and defence as they're using the river and their river boats and riverines and so forth through that. So these are very important avenues of advance, and that was another reason why the USA lost my first game, because I stupidly brought Grant, who's a very powerful leader. Where is he anyway? I brought him. I was trying to bring him down through here instead of one of the rivers where he would be doubled and all his brigades. But anyway, I soon corrected myself, but it was a bit late by then. So that's an obvious route you're going down, although you do get some forks as the C.S.A. start. Fort Donaldson and so forth. I can't remember exactly where, but the trouble is they're not necessarily there. You have to roll a die to see if they were completed, depending on the turn number. So you may or may not get one. You get one down in Vicksburg as well, or is it Memphis? I can't remember. But anyway, so there is that, and it's one of the Union goals is to they call it unvex the Mississippi. Then you have to bring the C.S.A. to $26 inflation, and have a stack, or at least a unit adjacent to Richmond, so be threatening Richmond. Everyone on the mountain is doubled on defence. So this was essentially quite stalemated. You don't really get exciting like Gettysburg and Jackson through the valley and so forth, but it is this high level treatment. So the action's really happening here. There it's more like shifting things around, trying to get a bit of an advantage, but because of the channeling and these doublings on defence, it's not going to go very far. I mean, I could have decided as to break out down here, but then I would have needed more defenders here, and you've got to worry about your supply routes. And as at USA, you don't really have the ability to sort of spread out here and here at the same time. You have to watch your supply chains. Yes, where was I going with this? Yeah, it's just to show you. So these are your routes. For example, if you get to here, as I said earlier, you can either turn left or right, but you can't go into those two hexes as the Union. You can also, you can come down here whilst you're going down here, or that you could have the Confederates come around here trying to cut off your supply like that. You've also got this, which comes down here, but then I realised a bit late as the Union, but then it's blocked. That's Confederate only. So the Union can come here and then you come back in. You can't whiz down there. Although that is Confederate only, so you cannot sort of skirt around as the Confederate. That's Union only, that's Confederate only. So if you're Confederate there, you can't just scoot around Vicksburg and maybe cut a supply line. So I think these have been very nicely thought out, and there's some around here in play testing, partly I guess historically, but also I think that they're just to stop gamey moves happening. Yeah, so you've got evasions here. This one you might think, oh, what's the point in having a hex that you can't move out of? But you gain 1 point of inflation, 5 points for a squared city for taking those. And as the American, you have these landing markers. You can just land them wherever you like, but you only have 2 at maximum. I only saw 1 come out, which makes me think I missed something in the chips, because there are 2, and I only had 1 come out. A supply marker is for inland invasion from the sea, so you could have 1 here, or as you like. So that is it, and just to show you. So the USA, you can go down around here, but you have to go all the way around. You can't go across that way, but you can go here. And these again are blocks, because there's only 2 of these, which means a general up 5 brigades maximum can be supplied over them. So that again, the Union can't sort of push through here. They have to go deep down and then across. So just some of the considerations for this great game, C.S.A. America's Civil War.